The Last Confession. Chapter 1: The Unexpected Call. Sarah Collins had always believed in the power of a good story. As a journalist, she had covered countless stories, some of which had taken her to the most dangerous corners of the world. But nothing could have prepared her for the phone call she received one cold evening in early November. Sarah was sitting at her desk, typing away at her latest article, when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. With a slight hesitation, she answered, "Hello, this is Sarah Collins." The voice on the other end was weak and trembling. "Ms. Collins, my name is Margaret Blake. I don't have much time left, but there's something I need to tell you. It's about a murder that happened a long time ago, and it's something only I can tell you." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard many confessions over the years, but something about Margaret's voice told her this was different. "Where are you, Mrs. Blake? I'll come to you right away." Margaret gave Sarah the address of a small, run-down nursing home on the outskirts of the city. Sarah grabbed her coat, notebook, and recorder, then hurried out the door. As she drove through the rain-soaked streets, her mind raced with questions. Who was Margaret Blake? Why had she chosen to confide in Sarah? And what was this murder she spoke of? Chapter 2: The Dying Woman's Confession. The nursing home was a depressing place, with peeling paint on the walls and a faint smell of disinfectant in the air. Sarah was led to a small room at the end of a dimly lit hallway. There, lying in a bed with her frail hands clutching the sheets, was Margaret Blake. Margaret's eyes were sunken, and her skin was paper-thin, but there was a determined look in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she whispered as Sarah pulled up a chair next to her bed. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Blake," Sarah urged gently, turning on her recorder. Margaret took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. "It was the summer of 1974. I was young then, newly married, and living in a small town called Ravenswood. There was a woman in town named Eliza Harper, a beautiful woman with a dark past. She was found dead one morning, and the police ruled it a suicide. But it wasn't a suicide, Ms. Collins. It was murder." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Murder? Who killed her? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "It was my husband, Richard. He was having an affair with Eliza, and when she threatened to expose him, he killed her. He told me everything, made me swear to keep it a secret. And I did, all these years. But now, with death so near, I can't carry this burden any longer." Sarah was stunned. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Margaret shook her head weakly. "Richard was a powerful man in Ravenswood, well-connected. He made sure that everyone believed it was suicide. The truth would have destroyed him, and I was too afraid to say anything. But I can't die with this on my conscience. You have to find the truth, Sarah. Find out what really happened to Eliza Harper." Chapter 3: The Investigation Begins. Margaret's confession left Sarah reeling. As she drove back home, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a simple case of murder. There was something deeper, something darker, buried in the past. The next morning, Sarah began her investigation. She started by looking into the history of Ravenswood, a small town about 2 hours' drive from the city. The town had a quiet reputation, but it was clear that secrets had been buried there for decades. Sarah arrived in Ravenswood and went straight to the local library. She spent hours poring over old newspaper articles and town records. It didn't take long for her to find mention of Eliza Harper. The articles from 1974 described her as a tragic beauty who had taken her own life, but there were no details about her relationship with Richard Blake. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah tracked down some of the older residents of Ravenswood. She visited them in their homes, asking questions about Eliza Harper and Richard Blake. Most of them were reluctant to talk, but a few mentioned rumors of an affair. One elderly woman, Mrs. Henderson, remembered Eliza well. She was a lovely girl, but troubled, Mrs. Henderson recalled. There were whispers that she was involved with a married man, but no one ever confirmed it. After she died, the town just wanted to forget about it. Sarah's instincts told her that Mrs. Blake had been telling the truth. But proving it would be another matter entirely. Chapter 4: Unearthing the Past. Sarah knew she needed more evidence if she was going to prove that Eliza Harper had been murdered. She decided to visit the house where Eliza had lived, which had been abandoned for years. The house was a decaying relic, with boarded-up windows and overgrown weeds surrounding it. Sarah managed to find a way inside, stepping carefully over the broken floorboards and fallen debris. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was eerie. As Sarah explored the house, she found herself in what must have been Eliza's bedroom. There, in the corner, she noticed something unusual, a loose floorboard. Her heart pounded as she pried it open, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a faded diary, its pages yellowed with age. Sarah sat down and began reading. The diary belonged to Eliza, and the entries were filled with her hopes, fears, and, most importantly, her relationship with Richard Blake. Eliza wrote about how she had fallen in love with him, but as time went on, she realized he was using her. The last few entries were frantic, describing how she had threatened to reveal their affair unless Richard left his wife. One entry, dated just a day before her death, sent chills down Sarah's spine. I told Richard today that I couldn't keep his secret any longer. He was furious, said he would do anything to stop me. I'm scared of what he might do, but I can't live with this guilt anymore. I have to tell someone, no matter the consequences. This was the proof Sarah needed. Eliza had feared for her life, and it seemed her fears were justified. Chapter 5: The Conspiracy Revealed. Armed with Eliza's diary, Sarah knew she was close to the truth, but she also knew that Richard Blake wasn't the only one involved. There had to be others who had helped cover up the murder, and she was determined to find them. Sarah returned to Ravenswood and began digging deeper into the town's history. She discovered that Richard Blake had been a well-respected businessman, but there were rumors that he had ties to corrupt officials and shady deals. It seemed that many people in Ravenswood had a vested interest in keeping the past buried. One name kept coming up in her research: James Whitmore, the former police chief who had led the investigation into Eliza's death. Whitmore had retired years ago and was living in a secluded cabin outside of town. Sarah decided it was time to pay him a visit. When she arrived at the cabin, Whitmore was surprised to see her but agreed to talk. He was an old man now, his once imposing frame shrunken with age. As they sat on the porch, Sarah showed him Eliza's diary and asked him to tell her the truth. Whitmore sighed deeply, looking out at the trees surrounding the cabin. "I knew this day would come," he said. "I knew someone would eventually uncover what really happened." He admitted that he had been part of the cover-up. Richard Blake had used his influence to ensure that the investigation was closed quickly, and Whitmore had gone along with it. "I was young and ambitious," Whitmore confessed. "I thought I was doing the right thing, protecting the town. But it was wrong, and I've regretted it every day since." Sarah pressed him for more details, and he revealed that there were others involved: local politicians, business leaders, and even a judge. They had all conspired to keep the truth hidden, fearing that the scandal would ruin them all.